Hi, welcome everybody. My name's Shonta Brandt Larson and welcome to Motherhood Unplugged 2.0. Motherhood 2.0 Unplugged is basically founded for my doctorate. My doctorate is 5 years worth of research around what makes the difference to children when they're adults, to adulthood. And the definition of success not being about, the job title or that regal royalties that you have, but fundamental things like perseverance, characteristics, and also their happiness. So things that are really going to make a difference to their life and the happiness and well-roundness of a human being. When I worked with those, looking at that quantitative piece, I also worked with a lot of mothers, and those mothers were challenged in different areas of their life, around their happiness, around their health, around their time. And what I noticed was there is a generational difference about what we need today versus what we needed yesterday. And that's how I really found Tricia, who's here with me today. And there were three really amazing things that inspired me. So one, how many books you've written. So 50 plus books. I don't know if I still have the ambition one day to write a book, but you're a well-renowned author. Two, you have used your life experience as a teenage mom to really work as an influencer in this space. And I think that doesn't just come from a place of what you're doing. You actually also volunteer in this place and help the next generation, those teenagers, which is part of the audience that I'm looking to basically support. So it really made sense to connect with you and what you're doing and get your viewpoints on this generation and how we can change that and how we can support mums going forward. So Tricia Goyer, I'll go through the questions and take you through. So,
okay, thank you.
So what do you love most about being a mum?
I think what I love most is just realizing that I am impacting a future generation and just the time I'm able to spend with my kids. We have 10 kids, so we've adopted 7 of them.
Wow.
And 6 of them from foster care. And so I have 3 older ones. And it's really beneficial to have older ones and know that they do turn out okay. So we have 3 that are adults and 7 younger ones. And just knowing that all that time and all the attention that I poured into them when they were little really made a difference. And, the relationship goes back and forth. It's me giving to them, but also just them loving me in return and growing into amazing people. So it's been an awesome thing to see from these tiny babies into adults now that have, one of my oldest son has 2 kids of his own. So it's amazing to see how he's carrying on and continuing with his life.
So what's the age range? What's the age span of the 10?
Okay, so our 3 biological kids are 28, 25, and 23.
Wow.
And our 2 boys live close to us. Our daughter actually teaches at the university in the Czech Republic. So she's 25. She's a university professor at 25. And then we've adopted 7, and so they range from ages 7 to 17. So there's 7, wow. 10, 12, 14, and 17.
So you're never not busy enough because you're writing books and you have 10 kids and 2 grandchildren.
And 2 grandchildren, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that was going to answer my second question of how many kids do you have, but 10 was like, okay, that's quite a handful. And what drove the decision for adoption?
John and I had raised 3 kids, and I was mostly drawn to adoption first. I had read an article about just kids in needs of home, and at the time we were looking into China. There was a lot of baby girls open for adoption in China. Yeah. That didn't work out, but then we discovered there's a lot of kids, here in the United States through the foster care system. Okay. So their parents' rights were taken away, often because like drug use or incarceration, those types of things, and they're kids that just need a mom and dad. So there's no way that they're going to be able to go to their biological parents, and so they just need a mom and dad. Mm-hmm. And so we said, we're still young. I was a young mom. I'm 46 now and have a 28-year-old, so I was actually a teen mom. But I'm like, I'm still young. I could do this again. And then once we adopted 1, and then we adopted a sibling group of 2, and then really saw a need for teen girls to be adopted.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they age out of foster care, they're just on their own. And so my husband and I looked into adopting older girls, and we were matched with a sibling group of 4 older girls.
Oh, so you kept the siblings together?
Yes, so they're
nice.
together.
Okay. So, I mean, what's interesting, maybe we'll delve, because maybe there's different perspectives about what challenges you face, because I guess your life changes, right? So, but taking on from a teenage must be different from taking on as a baby. So let's take a step back, yeah? So you've told me what you love most, but what changed for you when you became a mom? How did you define yourself differently when you first became a mom?
Right. Well, when I first became a mom, I was only 17. So I was a senior in high school. I just graduated 3 weeks before I had my son.
Wow.
And so immediately I started thinking about, because I've been making very poor choices as a high schooler.
Okay.
And so then all of a sudden I had a child to think about. So what choices am I going to make? So I started attending college and started thinking about my life. I also met and eventually married John, who was a really good guy. And before, the guys I dated were they were really cute sports guys. I don't know. They're the football players and the guys that got into trouble a lot. So when I became a mom, it's actually a little backwards than most people, because I became a mom first and then later got married. And so it just made me think about, when I had my child, I started thinking about life differently. It's just not me, but how am I going to give my child a future too?
Okay, so there was your whole thought process wasn't just on self; it was also on your children, on others. Okay,
right.
And you also then you managed to graduate and do that straight away, even before having your first child. Was there any redefinition of yourself after adopting, or that was pretty much the same, a continuation, or was there a redefinition after you had the first 3, which there's an age gap? Was there anything else that changed?
I would say a lot changed, because I thought I knew how to be a good mom because I had 3 and they were great kids. They turned out great. And I think I was redefined because I realized that it wasn't just like, okay, these are my ideas and this is how I parent and this is how kids need to obey me. It was taking in kids that come from hurt places, that had been hurt by people before, and really learning how to love those kids. And I learned it was more important to have a relationship than rules, because it's easy. Like when you have kids from a baby, they know that you love them. Like you're there, you're taking care of them. They know that you love them. And then eventually you get rules. So you don't touch that, don't say those things. Like you teach them rules, but the relationship is there first. And I think my biggest mistake when I first started adopting, especially older kids, was all of a sudden they move in and they have all these rules. Like, we don't say those things, we don't watch that kind of time to show, we don't do this, we act this way, but there was no relationship there first. And so I think it was a struggle not only for me, but for them, because I was trying to enforce all these rules without that relationship there. And so really I had to step back and say, okay, I'm going to focus on one thing at a time. And so we're not going to worry about chores at the beginning. We're not going to worry about this. We're just going to focus on maybe speaking kindly to each other. That's the one rule we're going to focus on. We'll worry about bedtime and all these other things later. And so really I had to focus on just spending time with them and building relationship, and then gradually adding on the rules. So it was completely different. And just defining there's some stuff I had to let go. Like, I'm a very neat person. I like everything clean and organized. My house right now is just a mess. There's always toys. There's always shoes. There's laundry because there's 7 kids in the house. So I really had to kind of redefine, my worth is not in having a clean house. That my worth is loving and caring for these kids. And so that really changed as a mom.
And I think from an attachment point of view, if I think about attachment parenting, it is about forming that safety and love, which you get, if you have the baby from you, but from the adoption point of view, you have to form that base first. Where's the solid base, the solid foundation, and then comes the rules. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so, what other challenges have you faced being a mom across the spectrum?
Yeah, and I think some of the challenges goes back to my writing, because I'm a very driven person. So
you must be with all those books.
Yeah. Because I love writing. I love going to conferences and speaking and meeting with editors, and that stuff really fuels me. But I need to turn it off, like, because I have these kids, I have a family. There's times like this is my writing time, and this is my rest time or my time with my family, because I'm so creative and I love working so much. I could work 24 hours a day because it's so much fun. It's a job, but it's also a fun job. And so I think as a mom, it's taking that time to realize, no, I'm going to sit down and play a board game, or I'm going to.
So let's talk about that, because that actually comes up quite a lot. I'm a number of interviews through this series, and in this generation, mums are saying, well, I have these multiple roles, right? So these multiple roles, these creativities, these passions, and we've developed so far, more women that are educated than men. How do you balance that out? And you said you have to make yourself stop sometimes, but obviously there's a balance to making yourself stop, because you've authored so many books and you're doing so much. How do you manage those multiple passions and purposes that you have?
Yeah. And I think one thing is figuring out what are your priorities ahead of time and focusing on those. So for me, like, one priority is family dinners. Okay. So every night we usually sit around the table and have dinner together as a family, which means if I'm working in the afternoon, and I work from home and I homeschool, so I teach my kids from home. So I have my time for school, I have my time for writing, but by 4:30 I need to stop work and I need to work on dinner, and sometimes I'll pull some of my kids in to help me so that we can have that time around the table as a family. And I think that's so important, that face-to-face time. There's no electronics. We're just sitting there, we're talking, we're spending time as a family. So that's just a priority that I have. Another priority is reading to my kids. Yeah. So at bedtime, my kids, they're in their beds tucked in, and I sit up there and I read to them, and it takes 15 minutes. Like, it doesn't even have to take that long, but it's just because whenever you figure out what your priority is, then creating a habit around it. I really try not to work on the weekends. So, which is, you think, oh, there's all this time that we can get work done. So we tried, my husband and I, to go and do an activity with our kids. So this last Saturday, we went for a walk over a local bridge, and we went out for smoothies and just spent time together. And on Sundays, I try not to turn on my computer at all, have that time for my family. And so I think once you figure out what your priorities are, and realizing that, the time goes quickly. Like, they're going to be grown. I have a 28-year-old. And so I know that the time goes quickly, and they're grown, and then they have their own kids. And so realizing that these are my priorities, we're having time together, we're having dinner together, we're reading together, and then create habits around those priorities really makes a big difference.
Because you've got the priorities, but you've got the sacred time, you've got the no-go time, which reinforces the habit. Because I think people want to get into a habit, but you've placed those rules and those no-goes. Like, I am going to have dinner with my kids, I am going to read, with my kids. And I think the homeschooling also helps to give you that structure. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And so what opportunities did you grab that came up? So you're still a mum, because you became a mum and you've taken on a larger family. You had all these passions, and actually you've been really successful at it. So what opportunities did you grab to make it such a success?
I think what I realized was that I didn't have to wait until my kids got older. Okay. And so I first started writing. I attended my first writers' conference when I was 22 and pregnant with my third baby. So talk about, I was young, and I already had 3 kids by the time I was 22. So realizing that I didn't have to wait till my kids got older. And so just looking for opportunities like writers' conferences. I had friends who had the same dreams as me, and so they would talk about wanting to be a writer. I started a prayer group with 17 other women. None of us, well, I think one of us was published at the time, and we would just send notes back and forth and encouragement back and forth. This was email. This was before Facebook groups. We encouraged each other, and we supported each other, and every single one of us is published now. Every single one of us has books. And so I think it's just gathering people around you that are like-minded, who have the same dreams and goals, was really, really important to me. And there wasn't people in my life that said, that's dumb, why would you want to write a book? There was people that said, did you finish that chapter? Did you send a letter to that editor? Did you contact that magazine? So there was people in there that were supporting me, and then I was supporting other people, and that really helped too. We would critique each other's stuff, so we would send chapters back and forth and read each other's work. And so just surrounding myself with like-minded friends, and then setting up like that one time a year where I went to a conference, and I put on my professional clothes like I was a mommy for that 3 days while I was at the conference. And so I think there's opportunities all around us. And I think even now I still continue to sign up for online classes, and I'm always like figuring out how to do Facebook ads or how to do Instagram. It's just like there's so many opportunities out there. It's giving ourselves permission to grow in those areas. And so it does mean, for those 3 days, my husband had to take off work and be home with the kids. And, just last week I was at a conference, and my husband had 4 days off where he was home with the kids, and just realizing that it's okay, to take that time to further our skills. It's okay for us to do that once in a while.
And to get support from our husbands as well.
And to get support from our husbands.
And is there any tools or advice that you want to share that was particularly useful? So I think the prayer group and having those 17 other women that are also now published, that's quite amazing. Were they all, so it was because of the prayer initially, or were they all wanting to be authors, or the two just somehow manifested to combine into writers?
We met at a writers' conference.
Ah, okay, was that right?
They're all women that I had met at a writers' conference, and we became friends. And so I knew a couple of them ahead of time. But as we sat around tables, because you know how you just go to conferences and you meet people, and we just exchanged emails. And I was reading through the book at the time called, it's by Evelyn Christensen, How Prayer Changes Things, I think.
Yeah.
And just about how when we pray with other people, we're just encouraging them and supporting them. And so I just emailed all these women. So some of them didn't even know each other, and said, hey, do you want to just encourage each other? And so everyone would send me their requests, and I would compile it, and I would send them out. So we would pray for each other, but we would also encourage each other and support each other and say, yeah, I'll read your chapter for you, or give advice.
So that's clarified then. So I think the two fuse together. Any other tools and advice that you would give people that, and from a writing point of view, but also what you've done in terms of your career? You have literally surrounded yourself with people that take you higher.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that has been helpful, and it might be an interesting tip, is not to feel guilty if you're pursuing that when you have kids at home. Yeah, because what I found is that it benefited my kids. So now that I have older kids, I would take them along, say when I was interviewing someone. I wrote some World War II novels, and so here I was interviewing these veterans, and I took my kids along, and they were sitting there. How amazing that my kids got to be there to hear about this guy that was on Iwo Jima, or that was at Normandy. And so they really got to experience those things. Sometimes when I went on speaking trips, when they would say, we'll pay for your airfare, I would say, well, can I turn in my gas mileage instead and take my family? So they got to go on those things. But they saw me pursuing my dreams, and then they saw the finished result. So they'd hear me talking about these veterans, and I would talk about it at dinner time. Sometimes I'd say, can you pray for me because I have this book deadline? And then I would show them, like, hey, this is the finished book. So they would be able to see. And I think so many times we want our kids to grow up and do amazing things, but we tell ourselves, well, I can't do anything until they're older. But the best example is for us doing it, to be out there, to be following our dreams, to be taking those steps of faith, to be really working hard. And that's exactly showing them what they need to do. And so, like my daughter, she's decided she wanted to go to the Czech Republic as a missionary. And she ended up, when she was 21, moving there. And now she's teaching English. She still lives there, and she's teaching English in a university. My kids saw me following my dreams, and so my 23-year-old, he just had his first book published. So he wrote a book, and he got it published, and so it's like I was an example to them. And so I think that's a tip, that don't feel like you are shortchanging your kids when you're spending time following your dreams. It's actually a good example for them to see what it looks like and how to pursue those things, even when it's really hard at times. And
that actually came up a lot in the qualitative research with mothers. They found this guilt that they had, but they had this passion and they had this purpose, that they wanted, but they felt guilty for spending that time. And show it, but then the opportunity of showing your kids that path, there's an opportunity cost if you don't, because then you're just settling, Yeah. Okay.
And then if you're just sitting there thinking, oh, okay, I'll wait till they're older, then they don't know what it looks like to follow their dreams because they've never seen it done, and so maybe they'll put it off, like following their dreams.
Yeah. And what's your focus now then? New book, or what's your focus now?
Yeah, I just had a book come out, and it's called Walk It Out.
Okay.
The Radical Results of Following God One Step at a Time. So that just released a couple weeks ago. Okay. So I've been traveling, I've been speaking at conferences, doing radio interviews and all that sort of thing, and I'm working on another book. Mm-hmm. So usually I have like one that I'm working on and one that just came out. Wow. So it's this balancing act. But I'm working, my next one is a parenting book, and then I have a novel coming out. So it's always like kind of
fiction and nonfiction.
Fiction and nonfiction going back and forth, yeah.
Okay. And the One Step Closer to God, what's the synopsis of that? What's the...
Yeah, well, Walk It Out really was kind of my story about actually doing what the Bible says.
Okay.
So it was when because the Bible says to care for the orphans and widows. So in our lives, we've said, okay, this is something that we should be doing. And so we've adopted orphans. It also talks about caring for the poor or loving all people. So we go to a racially diverse church. And so we choose to gather with people that don't look the same as us, that come from other countries. And so it really is just looking at the Bible and saying, okay, these are the things the Bible tells us to do, and we should be doing it.
Okay. So taking the principles and showing that you're following that path. And I think your daughter is too, from what you've just said.
Yeah, absolutely.
And would anything stop you, or is that a silly question? Because I think that you're one of the limitless people that, that I've met. Is anything stopping you to make it happen?
I always look in the light of possibility. So what can happen? And I think I don't let the fears crop up, because it's always like, okay, what if I try to write this type of book? What will happen if it doesn't work out? And I just figure out, like, it'll work out. Like, somehow I could figure it out, or I'm looking towards the next thing. And so I really try to look at possibilities at what can happen. And maybe it's not in the same time frame as I think something can happen. That's another thing, too. Sometimes being patient and being willing to grow into the type of person that can do these projects. And so, I have lots of big dreams. There's even stuff kind of like in the background. I'm working with some producers in Hollywood and getting some of my stuff turned into books. Some of my books turned into TV stuff. And so it's just taking those steps of faith and realizing that, why not? Like, why not try? Okay.
And then, so last three questions. One of the things, we talked about motherhood, and actually attachment we've already talked about in your role. One of the other things that came across was sense making. So the kind of things that you do with your kids and the kind of activities. And you touched upon actually even taking them traveling and what you're bringing to them and showing your passions. But what experiences do you want for your kids to be able to grow, for them to make sense of the world? And all 10, maybe there's some different things, but what do you want to give them experience-wise of how they make sense of their world?
Yeah, and I think some of the things is just like we mentioned traveling different places, seeing how people live in different places. We've been able to travel to Europe with our kids. We're hoping to take our kids that we have now maybe into Mexico, in the coming years. And so just realizing that not everyone lives like we do in Arkansas. Like, I have
that challenge every day as well. So my kids think everything is just Switzerland, so we're traveling around the world next year. But it's a lens, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's giving them the lens of what the world is like, and even the church we choose to go to, we drive into the inner city, and so there might be homeless people laying in front of our church when we get there. In fact, it just happened the other day. We were dropping our girls off, and just giving them, like, not everyone is like us, and it's not like that we're better or they're less. So maybe they're having a hard time right now, and maybe we can do something. So we've carried around in our car like little care packages with water bottles and granola bars, and we talk about times where people have helped us. Like when my husband was in college, we hardly had any money, and people would go buy groceries for us. And so because people gave to us, now it's our turn to help other people. So it's not like saying we're better, we need to help these other people, but just saying everyone has a time of need, and if we can do something to help them. And so just giving them a lens of the world, that we're all different, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, we all have different levels of income that people have, and it's okay. Like, we're just there to support each other, and so we really try to give them a sense of that. We also encourage service.
Okay.
And so when I do my teen mom support group on Thursday nights, my kids will come, especially the older girls, and they'll help babysit for the teen moms when we have the classes. Sometimes we'll help sort baby clothes or diapers, and just giving them a sense that we are here to serve other people. That it's not just about us and what we can get and what we can achieve and what we can accumulate, but there's other people out there that we can be serving. And those things are really important to us.
That's very powerful. So then, second to last question now. What would you go around and tell pregnant you in the ear before you knew what it was like to have a child? And actually, I'll split that question to two for you, because I think there's what would you go and tell pregnant you, but is there any advice that you'd go and give the adopted, scenario as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think the pregnant me, I think I would tell her it's okay to follow your dreams, because I don't feel that sense of guilt. So even though I was doing those things, I felt this sense of guilt, like, why am I doing this? And I'm the worst mom ever, that I am spending this time away from my kids. And so just realizing that it's going to benefit your kids. Like, what you're doing and what you're choosing to do is going to benefit your kids. And so that's what I would tell, like, that pregnant person who had these little kids and felt like so guilty because we were volunteering instead of at the park. Okay. And then I think for the adoptive, pre-adoption, I would say focus on the relationship and just focus on time with the family.
Okay. And so finally, is there anything you want to share with the audience that you're doing or you want to offer to them?
Yes, I'm going to have a link that you'll provide for one of my books. It's called Balanced: Finding Center as a Work-at-Home Mom. And so many times I do get the questions of how do you do it all? How do you balance having kids and working from home and following your dreams and doing these things? And so that book is one that I wrote up as an ebook, and it's just an easy read for people to know about how to create white space on your calendar and how to focus on the things that are important, how not to feel guilty, how to spend time with your kids. All those things are kind of in the book Balanced. And
any tips on homeschooling in there as well to create the space?
I'm trying to. Well, I have another book called Homeschool Basics.
Okay.
So that one, you can find on that any online retailer, Amazon, that sort of thing. But Homeschool Basics really talks about a lot about homeschooling, and a lot of it. So much I've learned after being a mom is just relax. I think we get so stressed about trying to do all check all the boxes and finish all the tests and do these things and just really enjoy learning. And so I do a lot of reading out loud with my kids in homeschooling. We do a lot of stuff together. We'll go on adventures together, and just realizing that those things they are learning too. It's not just sitting down and filling out 30 questions, but it's really exploring the world and getting to know things of what's happening in the world too.
Yeah, and eventually they're able to serve in many different countries, leading many different things. So that's
it's hard when my daughter lives far away, but we see her once or twice a year. So it's great to know that she is having a wonderful life and being able to explore parts of the world. And it's places for us to visit too. So we get to go see her.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tricia. It was just amazing finally getting to meet you and have a conversation, and answered a lot more than I ever imagined, actually. So you're fab. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chantel. It was great talking to you.
Okay.